Hi everyone, Howard from StartupRemarkable.com here. I'm here at the Future of Web Apps London with a really special guest. He did a great talk earlier on today, Pete Koomen from Optimizely.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
So Pete founded a company, Optimizely, which helps us optimize our websites so they perform better. And it's through things like A/B testing. Just really briefly for somebody who maybe isn't so familiar with A/B testing, can you tell us, really quickly what it is, why it's important?
Yeah. So an A/B test. I mean, the concept is pretty simple. All an A/B test is making some change to a website or an email, for example, and then measuring the effect that change has on your visitor or your readers or whatever. So just probably a really simple example, maybe the simplest example I can give is, say you've got a web page and you're selling some widget and there's a button that says buy now. A really simple A/B test might be to change that button text from buy now to learn more, and then serve the buy now version to 50% of your visitors and the learn more version to the other 50%, and then measure which group are more likely to actually click through and therefore probably more likely to buy the product. So it's just optimizing by trying different variations of a web page and learning how those affect your traffic.
Awesome. And it can really make a huge impact to your business if you've got the right things. And I came across kind of optimization and that first from direct marketing and emails, and is that where it kind of derived from?
So it's the notion of A/B testing has been around for decades actually. Back in the days of direct postal mail,
sure.
Which I guess still exists, but back when that was the only form of advertising directly, you'd have people sending out different mailers to different cities, or 50 different mailers to one group, 50 different mailers to another group, and then once they've figured out which one's more effective, they'll send the entire rest of the group the more effective one. Different versions of the Sears catalog, for example. All of this existed long before computers took it and ran with it. But you can see it all over. A lot of the biggest companies now just A/B test the holy hell out of their sites. Google there was a pretty famous rant that came out a couple of years ago. As a designer was very frustrated because Google was A/B testing 50-something shades of blue on their website. But when you're at Google and an increase of maybe 0.1 or 0.2% means tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, that can be extremely powerful. And so I mean, there are a lot of great examples of websites using A/B testing to improve their performance. One of our favorites is back in the Obama campaign in 2008. A/B testing was responsible for something like $60 million in additional revenue for a presidential campaign, which is just tremendous. And all of that came from just rigorous testing and understanding how the website actually affected visitor behavior.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that actually, that you were doing the testing for Obama's campaign, weren't you?
So my co-founder actually served as the director of analytics on the Obama campaign in
Sure.
2008, and has since a lot of his experiences there led to Optimizely.
Sure.
A lot of the product insights that he gained, a lot of the frustrations that he'd had using platforms that were out there, kind of led to what we're doing now, and we're trying to make it much easier for companies to run A/B tests on their website.
Sure. Okay, and I would say we've got a startup started recently, and what kind of things should you start trying to, for someone who's just started up, hasn't done any A/B testing,
Right.
what's the kind of the starting point that you kind of say, maybe start testing these out first and foremost?
Yeah, sure. So let's say that you're a completely brand new startup, maybe pre-launch. I actually I wouldn't A/B test using a framework like Optimizely. I would just take maybe mocks, drawn up mocks or balsamic mocks or something, and actually put them in front of people and talk to them. I just think at that stage, there's not enough traffic. A/B testing is really about statistics. It's about measuring a whole lot of data and then determining whether there's some statistical difference between this group and this group. And when you've only got a handful of visitors every day, you can't get much value out of that. But you can get a lot of value actually by just talking to your users. Any way you can get in front of them. When you start to scale and you get in the hundreds of visitors a day, then it's actually you've gotten to the point where you can't talk to them all individually. And there's probably great gains to be had by A/B testing. And we usually advise people there are kind of two places where it's usually most valuable to get started. The first is calls to action. So on many web pages that aren't just sort of browsing oriented, there's a specific action you'd like your visitors to take, whether it's buy something or sign up for an email list or download this PDF. And button or the area where there's text explaining what this is, why you want it, why it's valuable to you, and then how to take that action. It's usually the area that's ripest for optimization. Those few key messages that people read, where it is on the screen, a lot of that can have a big impact. And then for other companies, especially ones that get more and more traffic, but maybe haven't necessarily invested in A/B testing yet, we just recommend just take a look at your analytics. Most companies have some sort of funnel or some sort of user flow, and there are usually big drop-off points at some point in there. That's probably the area where there's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of improvement, and A/B testing is a great way to figure out what's going to make that part of the page better, or that part of the funnel better. That's usually where we recommend to start.
And is it usually, I know, not being too generic, but do you find that it's the color shape of the button, or is it the words you use which tend to have the biggest influence? Say, using the example of the button for see more or whatever.
Right. Learn more versus buy now. So that's a really good question. We've tested both on our page. Typically, the color will make more of a difference depending on how the rest of the page looks. If you have a button that tends to blend in with the rest of the page, it often makes sense to have it be more of a contrasty, standout color.
Totally.
And people just tend to see it more. The eye is drawn to it. One of the kind of maxims of clean web design is you don't want to give your visitors too many choices.
Yeah.
And when there's a very clear second step or next step on the page, more users tend to follow that path, right? So that's where color comes into play a lot that we've seen. Text is a lot more subtle. So we have an example that we'll show a lot is we ran a call to action test on our own homepage. So there's a button on our page that used to say get started. So you fill in your web address on our page, and then you press get started, and you'll be dumped right into our tool. So you can start experimenting with it. And it's right there. It's just one click, and then you're right in the tool. But we found that actually changing that text to give it a try.
Give it a try.
Test it out.
Test it out.
Yeah,
cool,
we changed it to test it out. Actually resulted in 25% more people clicking through. And the hypothesis is that get started makes it sound like you're about to start a long sign-up process. And people don't want to do that, so they're just sort of, the barrier is a little bit higher for them to click through. So in that case, the text actually was very important. We've seen other cases where a company, for example, they had a landing page with a box where they described the features of their product. And they ended up changing that text, the whole box, to instead describe the benefits of the product. So it's sort of what problems is this solving thing. And they saw a double-digit increase in performance through doing something like that. So text, people do read. They don't read a ton. You don't want a ton of text on a page, but they do read, and it's often enough to make a big difference.
Awesome. So what I've got is that at very starting, before you've gotten too big, do it more qualitatively, talking to people, and then once you've got a certain level of traffic, you can start scaling things, maybe starting off with colors, and then doing more text on that. When you're using Optimizely, the thing I love about it is that it's just so easy to use. You don't need to code, isn't that right?
Thank you. So the value proposition for Optimizely, the thing that has really resonated the most with our customers is that to use Optimizely on a page, to actually run an experiment or a test with Optimizely, you need a single line of code that's pasted into the head of the page, and then you're done. That line of code doesn't change when you start an experiment. It doesn't change when you stop it. You basically paste that and you're done. And what this allows is for the engineering part of an org or the IT part to get involved, go through the installation, and then from that point on, the marketing organization can take the process over. This is a big contrast over platforms that require the marketing organization to kind of constantly be involved with IT to get tests up and running and then stopping. We've just found that in those cases, the barrier to entry is so high that most companies don't test, and it's such a valuable tool. It's almost insane. The number of folks we talk to just aren't testing at all. So Optimizely, what we try to do is separate out the engineering from the process so that marketing can drive the A/B testing process and do it using our sort of WYSIWYG editor.
Yeah, cool. And if you're a blogger, like, what should you? I suppose depends what your call to action is, I suppose. If you're trying to drive email sign-ups, that's the kind of thing you test?
So yeah, an A/B test always works best when there's a clear metric or maybe a set of metrics that you're trying to improve. We do have some very large blogs. So like one example is IGN, for example. They're a gaming review site. They're very much a browsing-oriented site. They don't sell. Much of their business doesn't come from selling things directly or having referral links. And so what they'll optimize for is they'll test headlines. So for a given story, they'll test a few different headlines and then see which one drives the most engagement or the most click-throughs. So there, as a blogger, if you're really serious about driving engagement on your site, there are ways to test that. There are ways to test for that. But there are sites where it's like a hobby site, for example, where you don't have really a clear driven thing that you're trying to optimize for. Kind of just putting the information out there. That may not be as appropriate for something like this.
Awesome. Well, Pete, I know you got to jump back into the conference. It's been great chatting to you. Just before you go, last one. If you were, say, a startup, okay, you've got maybe a couple of hundred people coming to the site now, so have a little bit of the traffic. What's the first thing you'd kind of say to start?
Startup, you got one page, you are doing one thing. What's the first thing you start optimizing? I would start with the value proposition. So maybe your byline, you've got 5 seconds of someone's attention, if that, if you're lucky, to communicate what you're going to do to make their lives better. That's the most crucial piece of text on the page. That's exactly where I would start.
And how do you get those options to test? Like you got tested versus, is there somewhere you would get those different, how do you find out what to test?
Picking an area to test is different than from coming up with a bunch of different things to test it, right?
Sure.
And right now, it's still very much a, what can you think of kind of thing. So it's
cool.
You've got, at some point as a startup founder, you hopefully had a lot to do with all the marketing text you're using. I'm sure you can think of maybe 3 or 4 different interesting ways to describe what you're selling or describe what you're doing. Just start with that.
Cool.
I mean, there's no one who knows your business better than you do.
Sure.
Go for it.
Awesome. So thanks very much. And where can we find Optimizely on the web?
You can find it at optimizely.com. Can I hold a card up to the?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't have a card in my pocket. You can find it at optimizely.com. That's optimizely.com.
Awesome, and I'll put a link to it on the blog post as well, of course. It's been great having you along.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Thank you.